but I have a fairly large vegetable garden, and its maintenance is very labor intensive. And I have to say, I felt really short of the job this summer. And in addition, the harvest is when you plant these gardens, you imagine what you're going to get. And oftentimes that doesn't happen because, first of all, there are varmints to deal with. The older I get, the more I'm on the side of Mr. McGregor than on Peter Rabbit. And oftentimes the weather simply does not cooperate. So the first year we moved in, I went hog wild planting all this stuff. And then in late July, we were hit with a storm of biblical proportions. The sky turned green, the wind knocked down trees, and even broke some of the windows in our house. And the hail shredded every single growing thing in the garden. Everything was ruined. If we lived a couple centuries ago, we would have had no food to feed our family for the winter. And then the following year, I saw this groundhog gleefully, he had a smile on his face, tearing down the corn and eating it. The bold, brazen article. Last year, the same groundhog or its mate or its friend or the rabbits ate my kale twice. I planted it. If you remember last year, it was really hot and dry. The ground was like concrete. I watered it for 2 or 3 days, planted it. It grew about that high. I came out and it was all gone. And then it grew back and then they ate it again. But it came back this year. It was the weirdest thing. So I had 4 gigantic kale plants that I make my lunch out of every single day. I go out and pick the kale. And then the white flies got it. Anybody ever see white flies? Talk about a pestilence. Try to pull that out. So this year I was determined to keep the varmints out. So I planted a forest of sunflowers, probably too many. And I put pinwheels outside one side of the fence. And then I have a big bluebird sort of animal thingy that I have by the gate that spins around with the wind. So far, so good. And then I planted a bunch of pumpkin seeds, imperial ones, expecting really good pumpkins. So thus far I have more than 4 now. So I have one really nice one that's still green. I have a white one, misshapen white one, a misshapen orange one. And then I have 2 little ones that are growing. They're just nestled there in the leaves. And I don't know whether they're really going to grow because the sun is not at the same angle that it was a couple weeks ago. And then I have another one growing right outside the fence. So I'll keep my fingers crossed. I don't know why I get so excited about pumpkins. I think I'm waiting for the great pumpkin. So when we drive down to Baltimore, we always take Route 1 and we drive through these wonderful fields of corn. And Larry says to me, wouldn't you like to own a farm? And my answer is never, no, never. You know, and it brings back this nostalgic feeling like things were so simple in the good old days. You know, it's so beautiful and calm. And then I think about my experience with this, you know, little garden, and I think, no, it was never simple. It was terrible. And I think our gospel sort of expresses that today, that things are just really unfair. And so when Jesus told this story, he knew what he was talking about. It was his story, and it was the story of all of the people listening to him. So the ancestors of all of us sitting here, unless somebody was really lucky, were probably all engaged in this back-breaking farm for centuries. Am I right? Anybody have a prince or a king or a duke or a duchess? No, my family were sharecroppers in Ireland or peasants in Poland. So 99% of the people of the world engaged in subsistence farming, or they were serfs on the farms of the wealthy. Bad weather like droughts or storms or insects could destroy a family's food supply, probably in a few minutes. Many of our ancestors immigrated to America to farm or to work in factories or shipyards or on the railroads, all for very hard work with very little pay. And then, like now, the rich amass great fortunes while people like our grandparents and great-grandparents worked 10 to 14-hour days, 6 days a week for a very meager salary. Am I right? You all have that story in your family? And because of the low salaries, families like my maternal grandmother and her siblings all left school in 5th grade to work in the hosiery factories in Philadelphia to supplement their family's income. My paternal grandfather, who worked on the railroad all his livelong days, died from exhaustion. My dad, a letter carrier, was an avid supporter of unions. He knew about the children who worked in the factories. He knew about the railroads where his father and grandfathers had worked. And he knew the railroad owners refused to implement safety devices for workers because the wealthy owners found them too expensive. As a result, railway workers lost their lives and limbs with great regularity. And without Social Security or survivors' benefits, families who lost their breadwinner sank into abject poverty regularly. It was cheaper for the owners to replace the workers than it was to keep them safe. And so this weekend, we honor all of those people, really the unforgotten little ones that nobody thinks about, whose tombstones are now, probably their names are fading away. And all the hard work that they did to build the lives for their families and for those who came up after us, those who are sitting here. And so as we think about those, I'd also like us to think about some of our contemporaries. People like Sue Plastaris, RN, wife of Jim, who passed away on Monday. Sue worked her entire life to make the world a better place. And nobody says it better than her family. Sue was a pioneer throughout her life who championed many causes. The right of nurses to work during pregnancy, the right of fathers to be in labor and delivery rooms. My mother used to tell me stories about how she was left alone to labor by herself for all those hours without anybody ever being with her. Provision of reproductive health care and education to teenagers, racial equality, excellence of care for injured workers, and quality at the end of life. Sue was a tiger nurse, advocating for each and every one of her patients, going above and beyond to provide extraordinary care, such as recording a favorite stream of music to play for a dying cancer patient. The latter years of her career were spent in case management and advocating for injured workers. At age 65, and for the next 20 years, Sue headed up a business, the family business, TLG Research Associates, in the field of ensuring quality medical care for injured workers. And in addition to all this work, which is impressive, she had 7 children. I think the word tiger best describes the toughness and determination of all of those who have gone before us, who have labored mightily in God's vineyard, while insisting that the status quo is simply not enough for the people of God. The folks who believe that everyone is entitled to health care, that everyone is entitled to clean air and water, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in a world designed by a loving God and not by the captains and the kings. And so we are grateful for all these tigers like Sue, who walked among us softly, but with great impact, whose lives of dedication and service made us all into the people and communities that we are today.